Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is definitely the Smash game that resembles its predecessor the most, but despite that, some characters were changed quite a bit, including giving them brand new moves. I recently talked about some of the best Smash moves over the years that didn't make it into Ultimate, but today, let's look at the opposite. Moves that are appearing in Smash Ultimate for the first time and were a huge boon to their characters. Now keep in mind, I'm looking for brand new moves here, not moves that had new functionality added or a new aerial variant or something like that, just brand new attacks that we've never seen before. I'm also not really getting into grabs or throws on this list because exactly what constitutes a new move for them is tricky and they're pretty difficult to compare to regular attacks anyways. All right, let's get into it. This video is sponsored by Surfshark VPN. Online security is becoming a bigger and bigger concern in our lives. My God, as someone who works on the internet, you can't imagine how many breach attempts I've had, and using a VPN can be a great way to help keep yourself safe. These things, for example, look, public Wi-Fi is a great utility, but if you're connecting to it without a VPN, unencrypted data is not that hard to intercept if you know what you're doing. Well, good thing your Surfshark account has no device limit, meaning that you can breathe easy while you're out and about browsing on a phone or tablet, or even both, and then come home and continue getting the benefits of a VPN on your computer. There's a lot of those, but to go with what I think is kind of an underrated example here, many websites will try and entice new customers with a really good bargain, but the thing is, they actually know that if you keep heading back to that website, you're more likely to make a purchase in the future statistically, and they can actually start having those offers dry up, or even worse, start price gouging you. But hey, Surfshark VPN can stop this, because why shouldn't you get the best deal every time? On the topic of deals, you can head to Surfshark right now using my link in the description and get 4 additional months of service absolutely free. With 24/7 customer support and a 30-day money-back guarantee, there's absolutely no risk in giving it a shot. And while you're there, why not check out their other great products like Surfshark Antivirus, Surfshark Alert, and Surfshark Search. We're starting off with a pretty busted option here. Pikachu's brand new neutral air, which feels right at home on his kit as if he always had it, which is even more impressive because it's actually the 3rd neutral air he's had over the years. And while don't get me wrong, Pikachu absolutely did get combo utility out of them, a big part of their strength was edge guarding, which played into Pikachu's overall role over the years as a strong edge guarding character, whereas his new neutral air pops opponents more upwards, so it's not nearly as well defined in that role, so you would think he might be unhappy about it, but in practice, no, he's doing just fine. And the main reason behind that is because the combos he gets off of this are inexcusable. The most dramatic example is probably what he can do off a single throw at starting percents. It can often net 50, 60 plus damage, which is so wildly out of archetype for the character. Pikachu seems poised to be this kind of keep away hit and run style character who kills you by dragging you off stage, and that's a sensible direction, but then for some reason he has the damage output of a heavyweight too. Remind me how this character is supposed to be overrated again? Those drag down combos don't end at early percents though, and they don't need to be anything particularly fancy. Drag down landing neutral air into down smash? Yep. That's a thing. And you can net stuff out of it rising too, which is nice because it's a frame 3 startup, which makes it a very viable out of shield option. It is a bit on the stubby side, your opponent needs to be right in your face, but Pikachu is so fast that running up and shielding to force that kind of spacing isn't really that big a problem for him. The same also applies if he's trying to use the move offensively because he has Thunder Jolt, which is an incredible tool to run behind. So yes, he is a very stubby character overall, but that does a lot to compensate. And the hitbox is even a bit disjointed. This is the only move that Pikachu had which was fundamentally replaced coming into Ultimate, but it's hard to overstate just what a difference that made to his overall play patterns. Like, I want to emphasize his old neutral air, the spinny one, it was fine. It was solid. It did the job. Not a bad tool on his kit by any means. This new one though, a huge amount of what Pikachu is looking to land in a match now is neutral air. It's the clue behind his combo game. He can kill off it at any percent. He got to keep all the strengths of moves like up tilt and down throw and up air that synergize so naturally with it. Like I said, it just feels like it's always belonged there. From a design perspective, I also like that it feels a bit like Mewtwo's neutral air. It's a fun bit of parallel between some of the most iconic Gen 1s. And then he also no longer shares a neutral air with Pichu, and it feels like he's gained better control over his electric powers. Good stuff. And while we're on the topic of good new functionality, let's talk about Dr. Mario's down air. Mario and Dr. Mario used to have one of those drill style down airs. Now, even after Mario got his replaced, Dr. Mario kept the old version. Those moves often have a place, and it wouldn't be fair to say the move did nothing for Dr. Mario, but it didn't do a lot more than nothing. Like, it was fine. It was a multi-hit, so you could trade against certain recoveries with it. That had some utility, but overall, drag down combos in Smash 4, for example, weren't really that much of a thing. Moves just tended to have a bit too much landing lag, and that actually really applied here. It was quite laggy. You could get some combo utility off it, but it sent opponents sideways, and Dr. Mario was just too slow to really pursue against that. So while it was functional, it wasn't really contributing that much to his overall game plan. In Ultimate, where landing leg is lower across the board, it probably would have been a much better move, but who cares, because they decided to just replace it with a big stomp, which is way more fun anyways. And it also synergizes surprisingly well with his toolkit. Doc has some of the absolute best combo starters in the game, so it's very easy to, for example, put an opponent onto a platform, which Danner can cover quite comfortably, and then he just gets to keep the pain train rolling. He can combo into it as well, most notably off of pills, which were buffed in Ultimate to have far more hits done, and while a lot of his toolkit benefited from that, in the right positioning, Danner is probably the cheesiest. And Dr. Mario also has phenomenally powerful moves, so even landing it as just a raw combo starter in a simple 1-2 can still net big payoff. And Dr. Mario is very good at sending opponents sideways in particular. He's less vertically oriented than Mario is, so getting your opponent off stage and then just having a nice big simple spike to wind things down, it's a nice option. He has other tools he can use in those situations too, but you can't argue with the results. It's very powerful. Such a good addition to his moveset. I really like how in Ultimate, even though Mario and Dr. Mario are literally the same person, they still really went out of their way to give them two distinct identities. In Dr. Mario's case, he feels a lot meaner, which on the one hand is kind of an interesting call for a life-saving medical doctor, but on the other hand, he's been established for a while as being kind of a bruiser take on regular Mario, so this does fit. Okay, but what about the other Super Mario brother? What's he getting up to? Let's talk about Luigi's up tilt. The one they decided to use the last few games was interesting. I do like that it was very distinct from Mario, but I'm not really sure what Luigi's doing, to be honest, or why it's the best fit for him. And yeah, it was another one of these moves that did stuff. It didn't have too much knockback and it hit behind him a little bit, but outside of some pretty limited combo situations, Luigi's just didn't really tend to use the move too much. Luigi's ubiquitous combo still often didn't use it, and as far as making it an anti-air or whatever, is competing against a fast, invincible, highly damaging, highly killing up smash, so good luck with that. The Smash Ultimate version doesn't hit behind him anymore, but for the situations you would actually practically use it in, it's a massive upgrade across the board in basically every other way, and it's a shockingly good move. Earlier on in Ultimate's life, I didn't appreciate just what a good combo tool it actually was, even by Luigi standards where combos are the main thing he offers. It reaches way into the air and even hits through platforms. It starts on frame 5, which makes it really easy to combo into, something Luigi doesn't exactly struggle with. And it also ends very quickly, which makes comboing off of it, if anything, even easier. You can combo it into an aerial of your choice, you can combo it into some high damage finishers like Up Smash or Luigi Cyclone. If you're really looking for early, corny kills though, don't forget, this also combos into Super Jump Punch. I don't really know why it does that, but it does. People have known that Luigi's combo game's ridiculous since day one, but it has definitely gotten more refined as Ultimate's metas advanced, and I would say one of the more interesting additions is up tilt being used more frequently. It's not the world's worst move to throw out as an anti-air or whatever too, but the main thing it offers is definitely linking combos together. And considering what Luigi's able to end combos with, that's that's terrifying. Sticking with the close quarters theme here, we have Wario's new forward tilt. Up until Ultimate, forward tilt was a very filler kind of move for Wario. Yes, it did kill, but it didn't have great range. Its kill power was worse than other moves of his. It just wasn't really the kind of thing you wanted to be doing very often. This new hand slap that he gained in Ultimate is essentially just a strict upgrade. It's got the same amount of startup as the old version, but it kills earlier, it's more disjointed, and it's got a much bigger hitbox. That bigger hitbox is really nice when you consider that you can angle the move too. Most notably, the downward variant hits ledges very comfortably at this point. And obviously, having extra range is always something you're looking for, especially when you're a brawler character who doesn't move particularly fast on the ground. But it's an even bigger deal in the slaps case, because when you combine that range with its particular frame data, it starts getting to the point of being kind of pseudo-safe on shield. Strictly speaking, it's minus 15, which yes, is slower than a lot of out of shield options, but unless you're facing a character who doesn't need to try and drift over to you, in practice, provided the Wario player spaces it well, they often get away with it. And that's a pretty good risk reward because, remember, this is a very effective kill move now. Speaking of good kill moves now, I also definitely could have given this slot to Wario's new dash attack, the shoulder bash. That was another big addition to his kit in Ultimate. He takes a lot of stocks with it. If you look at his old dash attack though, it functioned very differently, and while I still would probably say the new one is better, I wouldn't call it a strict upgrade like I would for forward tilt. I also briefly talked about the shoulder bash in a different context for my cut moves video, so yeah, let's put some other moves in the spotlight regardless. Let's get away from the Mario series here. Number 5 is Ike's up air, my beloved. Ike's helicopter up air in Brawl and Smash 4 was actually pretty well suited to those games' environments, specifically the fact that air dodges had no directional component to them. It was extremely powerful, it stayed out for a while, which made the timing on catching bad air dodges very lenient, and when you put those traits together, it created some of the scariest 50-50 setups in either game. If you'd kept it for Ultimate, it still would have done stuff, and its landing combo potential would probably have been even better, but the addition of directional air dodges would definitely hinder one of its biggest strengths. That may be part of the reason they decided to replace it with a sword arc, which, while less distinctive than the old version, is also very good at being a sword arc. Because this thing is just enormous. Look at it. The old version's range was actually kind of conservative by Ike standards. This one catches everything in his general gravitational orbit. That's especially important given the changes to neutral air, which turned it into a staple combo tool. Neutral air into up air is one of the main things that Ike players look for nowadays, and even though the old version and the new version start up on the same frame, the old version just would not connect on a lot of this stuff. Helps that it gets to keep the old version's incredible kill power. The main trade-off it took was losing that long-lasting hitbox. But again, with the air dodge changes, that's not the end of the world. It does also affect landing up airs, to be fair. Landing with a sword arc is a thing, but on smaller characters in particular, it can be kind of sketchy. You don't have much of a window. Landing with the helicopter would probably be easier, but even in Brawl and Smash 4, it honestly wasn't that much of a thing. And in Smash Ultimate, you have a giant neutral air with barely any landing lag that leads into huge combos, so why bother? A similar change coming up next that, if anything, made twice the impact: the Ice Climber's up air. The Ice Climber's up airs in Melee and Brawl were just kind of these tepid pokes above them, and they worked. They were functional tools when your opponent was above you, and if both climbers were in play, they dealt a lot of damage, but the thing is, they have extremely poor air mobility, so this could be kind of hard to line up, and unless your opponent was trying to hard camp you, which... okay, yeah, that did happen for sure, but if not, it just didn't really do all that much for their general game plan. The Ice Climbers in previous games wanted to grab you, and that was pretty much it. Ultimate didn't get rid of ridiculous grab, zero to death stuff, but it definitely toned it way down, and the thing is, if you don't land it, and you just get, say, more conventional down throw into up air chains, that's still actually really good. The change to a sweeping overhead arc for the Ice Climbers made it very viable to connect multiples of them together, and my god, they still deal a lot of damage. The same goes for comboing up air out of Squall Hammer, for example, one of the Ice Climbers' overall most important moves. They still really want grabs, don't get me wrong, but in Ultimate, that's not really all they want. Like with a lot of characters, their overall game plan's been diversified a bit more compared to previous Smash games. They're also way harder to land on than they used to be because they can actually cover diagonal approaches in the air. Up tilt still pokes straight up, and up smash does cover an overhead arc, but that's obviously pretty committal. Their air physics are still terrible in Ultimate. They did actually technically get a bit of a boost coming in, but that doesn't really matter because so did basically everyone else. And yet, despite this, they still ended up with a legitimate juggle game here. The hammers are honestly kind of rough to get around. And of course, there's the expected Ice Climber's barrage of ultra-technical hand-breaking stuff that can now actually incorporate up air into some of those sequences pretty comfortably, whereas before, the skinnier hitbox would limit those opportunities a lot more often. Turns out overhead sword arcs, or hammer arcs in this case, are good moves. Who knew? And if we're talking about good new moves, you know Wolf's dash attack has to be on here. This is not a strict upgrade over his old dash attack, but it's functionally about as close as you're gonna get. Let's be honest, his old one was a very weird move. It didn't do all that much for him. Now, it does look like it was designed more as maybe a combo starter, and in Brawl, those moves were basically dead on arrival anyway, so if you kept it in Ultimate's engine, it could do more, to be fair. But that's kind of a moot point because it's not an Ultimate's engine, and in Brawl, you basically never see Wolf players using it, period. Not only because it's kind of mediocre to start with, but also because it's got some pretty stiff competition. Wolf's forward smash has enough range to essentially make it a second dash attack. And sure, back in Brawl you couldn't freely smash attack out of a run like you can in Ultimate, but that's actually fine because everyone walked anyways. So it did that while also starting up a frame faster than his actual dash attack at frame 10, making it one of the overall fastest forward smashes in the entire series, while also coming with actual kill power behind it. Now, true, it didn't have a whole ton of anti-air potential, which should have been one of the real deal's big strengths, but even in those scenarios, dash attack was essentially competing with itself because Dacus, dash attack cancelled up smash, was a tech unique to Brawl. And I mean, just look at this. It outpaces the pure dash attack so much, whether we're talking about burst distance or anti-air potential, that it just makes you feel bad for the original. So even when the game was played as intended, dash attack was still pretty lame, and when advanced techniques came into play, forget it. His conventional dash attack providing solid momentum for Dacus was probably the best thing it ever did. His new one, on the other hand, I called one of the overall overall best dash attacks in the entire game a while back, and I stand by that. It's got incredible standalone burst range even with Dacus removed, which makes it very good for crossing up shields ambiguously, for example, as well as being a very good standalone approach tool. And while yeah, he's not kicking into the sky anymore, he still holds his foot pretty high up, so you can catch a lot of jump startups with it, landings with it, that kind of thing. You can use it in combo applications, again helped out by that great burst range, and in certain situations it'll even combo into stuff itself. This doesn't happen too often at kill percents, but its overall traits, including very solid kill power, are so strong that just raw dash attack kills are a very common thing you see happen in Wolf gameplay. I could also have mentioned his neutral air here. The kick he gained in Ultimate is surprisingly big and leads into a lot of his best stuff, but his old one did have some appealing traits of his own. In particular, it was frame 4 compared to frame 7 for the new one, so it really would have improved Wolf's out of shield game if he still kept it. And while I don't think the animation really reflects this, it actually had a bit more kill power too. So yeah, dash attack it is. Whether we're talking about the animation or the functionality, that's gotta be one of the biggest glow-ups I've seen. Going in a very different direction for our next one here, we have Mii Brawler's Suplex. This move replaces the Headache Maker from Smash 4, which was, fine. To be fair, that's also how I describe Mii Brawler in Smash 4, at least if custom sizes weren't enabled. But yeah, not a huge loss. Suplex, on the other hand, brings quite a bit to the table. It's a command grab with a frame 13 startup, which, considering Ultimate's input delay, is on the verge of unreactable, and it also lunges Mii Brawler quite a good distance forward. There are slightly faster command grabs, there are slightly longer range command grabs, but when you consider the overall balance of how far you can grab an opponent from and how fast it is to start up, this is honestly in the very upper echelon for me. And it does really good damage too. It doesn't lead to any follow-ups afterwards, and it also doesn't kill, but considering how easy it is to connect, including being able to use it as a combo ender, that's totally fine. Honestly, if this move also killed, it would be a legitimate problem. Well, I say it won't kill. The exception is if you go for the classic kamikaze strat. It's not the absolute best command grab for that, but you can do it. Now, in practice, it actually has some pretty stiff competition because it's directly competing against the burning drop kick, which improves Mii Brawler's recovery quite a bit because it gives him by far his best burst movement option. It's such a good burst movement option that it radically transforms as neutral, but you know what else transforms neutral? When your opponent's not allowed to shield. And while I think burning dropkick is probably the more common pick nowadays, it speaks to the immense strengths of Suplex that it really is able to keep up. It's not an uncommon pick on Brawler Lodos by any means. And it's another move that just fits him really well. You look back at Smash 4 and you're like, huh, you know, actually the quintessential Brawler character not having a command grab does feel kind of weird, doesn't it? Popping up. Fittingly, at number 9 here, we have Mr. Game & Watch with forward air. Give the old Cement Factory box swing its due, by which I mean the credit card swipe. Everyone just called it the credit card swipe. It was pretty good at what it did. It was essentially a killing sword move with a lingering sour spot on it. That's not a bad option. When Ultimate transitioned him over to this weird bomb drop thing that no one else on the roster even came close to, and it turned out you could swat those bombs out of midair, people were nervous. There was a lot of skepticism running around over it. Fast forward a bit, and look, I'm not willing to definitively sign off on whether he'd be better or worse off overall if he kept the credit card swipe, but bottom line, Mr. Game & Watch turned out to be a very good character, and the bombs, yeah, they're just straight up good. There are a lot of moves in Ultimate that are relatively safe on shield, but the concept of something being plus on shield almost never happens, and among aerials is essentially unheard of. Yeah, full hop forward air is plus on shield, which means that, for example, you can do a high forward air and then go for a grab, and if they actually let the bomb explode on their shield, there's nothing they can do. They're just getting grabbed. There is counterplay to this kind of thing, of course. They can dodge the bombs or preemptively attack them. They can try and shield grab before the explosion actually goes off. But if every move that had counterplay was bad, there would be no good moves. And if the bomb hits, it leads into combos at early percents, and Mr. Game & Watch is one of the scariest early game combo characters as part of what makes him so good. It could be an excellent edge guarding and ledge trapping and two-framing tool, especially against recoveries that don't have active hitboxes directly above them. The fact that it kills is a big boost to that, but in edge guarding situations, you don't always even need to straight up kill them. Not letting them make it back is functionally good enough. Mr. Game & Watch is also a pretty floaty character, so in a lot of situations, he can just double drop bombs on you. You can swat them away as usual, but now you're getting into really specific timings, and if you screw up, you're gonna feel it. It's a persistent hitbox that covers a huge amount of space and explodes on contact. Yes, it's an unusual move, but describe it in those terms and suddenly it all starts making sense. A couple of honorable mentions before we get to our last choice here. Link's remote bomb that he gained in Ultimate actually absolutely does deserve to be on the main list. I just decided not to include it because at the end of the day, these lists are always more about the discussion than the placement, and I've talked about it a lot recently, and I feel like people generally know it pretty well. The same applies to every move that was covered in the best moves that were cut video. So if you don't see one here that you were wondering about, hey, maybe check it out. Kirby's new dash attack, or more accurately, an upgraded version of his old dash attack that returned in Ultimate, I definitely did consider it. It's a good move, I just don't think it's an insane move. Doesn't get nearly enough use. Same deal with Bowser's new down smash. He functionally got a down smash in Smash Ultimate, so you know, that's a good thing. I can't complain about that. that, but at the end of the day, Bowser players just don't use it all that much anyways. Greninja and Peach both got their down tilts tweaked, not by a ton, but yeah, I would say enough to count. And they both do what they used to do better. I would say particularly Greninja, he can do like close hit down tilt into up smash more reliably now, for example. I just didn't think the change was nearly as dramatic as what showed up here. And then that brings us to our final candidate, and oh man, is it a fun one. Ganondorf's forward smash. So in that best moves that were cut from Smash video, I talked about how good Ganondorf's new up smash is, but also how incredible his old one was and the tension that existed between them in terms of which one you'd rather have. When it comes to forward smash, I don't think any of that applies. The sword swing is so much better. His old one, that elbow strike, was still incredibly powerful, but Ganondorf's whole thing is being incredibly powerful. And the fact that it had so much startup and its range wasn't that good and it was so unsafe meant that Ganondorf players really didn't use it all that much outside of a Hail Mary hard read or if their opponent gave them an obvious opening. It didn't even really have the usual caveat of, well, at least I can charge it up in shield break situations because... His new one, that giant sword swing, contributes so much more. Even though it's a whole 8 frames slower than the elbow strike, it's still much easier to hit in practice because of how much bigger the hitbox is. It covers behind Ganondorf, above Ganondorf, in front of Ganondorf far more, it hits through platforms, and despite also being laggier than his old forward smash, it's also safer. It's got that Wario forward tilt thing going on where it can be surprisingly difficult for some characters to get to if it's spaced well. So it's easier to hit, safer to go for, and it's also more rewarding if you do land it. It's one of the most feared kill moves in the game for a reason. Look at this. I talked about that elbow strike being strong, and yeah, overall it's a pretty strong move, but I've got to say, whenever I go back, it's like, you know, in comparison, what else is there to say here? This has become one of Ultimate's absolutely most iconic moves, and I couldn't be happier about it. People had been adamantly asking for Ganondorf to use a sword for almost 2 decades before Ultimate was revealed, so it being a crowd pleaser was inevitable, but I'm legitimately happy and impressed by just how practical Sakurai allowed it to be. Big, slow, ultra-powerful moves like this rarely see a lot of competitive use. This actually does. It's still a bit of a swing for the fences, but the risk-reward ratio is just good enough to actually make it kind of tempting no matter how hard you're trying to win, and I love it. Alright, this has been the top 10 moves that were added to Smash Ultimate, and I think that'll do it for today. Thanks for watching, everyone. Let me know what you thought of the list. Any big moves I missed on here? Likes and comments go a long way towards helping a video in YouTube's algorithm, so if you think this one deserved it, much appreciated. You can check out another MockRock Talk video here, a video on MockRock covering a Zelda rework below, and patrons, members, and subs get perks like early videos and Discord access. Later, people.